I'm going to ask my partner, Steve Rowen, who is my co-author on this report, to talk to us about organizational inhibitors, technology enablers, and recommendations.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Brian, for bringing us through the front half of that. I get to try to bring us home here. As Brian mentioned at the beginning when he talked about our methodology, every report that we do, it's important for us to query retailers about what they recognize as the roadblocks that are in their own way. As you might imagine, from one report to another, there does tend to be some commonality here because, as we've mentioned so many times already, this is the retail industry here, and a lot has been thrown at them in a very short period of time. So, as it relates to this new exciting era of technology that's basically knocking on their door, what do retailers say are the things that are preventing them from moving forward? So, this is the organizational inhibitors. And if we move ahead one slide, what we'll see is that retailers are profoundly uncomfortable that their future is IT dependent. Um, Brian does a great job with the graphics here. If a picture says 1,000 words, this one says it all. We asked retailers, what are the top three things preventing you from moving forward with IoT solutions? We've already learned in this report, there's tremendous opportunity. They see all these greenfield opportunities to say, oh my God, if we could only throw technology at this, we could learn more about how our customers are moving, about how our product is moving, about X, Y, and Z. Anything that you might imagine could benefit from these IoT solutions, but it's all for naught if half of retailers tell us their IT team just does not have the capacity to take on these projects. If you are a technologist, this could either be seen as a gating factor or an opportunity to really get your sales team in line to talk directly to this pain point when they're out confronting retailers. Because the perception in the industry is this is going to be heavy. It's going to take an awful lot of time. It's going to drain resources that are already pulled far too thin. And so if technologists can credibly talk to the fact that IoT is not quite as difficult as it might seem, particularly on the IT department, that message is going to land and it's going to land well. Pretty much everything else on this chart falls directly in line with that. Number two, our existing infrastructure is just not capable. These are, for lack of better terms, excuses, but they're valid excuses. As we've said numerous times throughout not only this presentation, but the report itself, if you choose to read it, retailers were pretty happy to take a back seat for a long time from pretty much the advent of the iPhone until the pandemic and say, well, we'll invest later in the technologies that we think, consumers are really going to want. Well, consumers have spoken and they want everything all at once, all literally knocking down with a tremendous amount of weight on retailers' IT teams, on their executive management, trying to determine which of these things need to be triaged most. So the top two are probably the most important ones to get around. And as we say time and time again in the clients that we consult, if you can help retailers get past this pain point, you've already done a tremendous job because it is a pain point and they are feeling the pain. There's a couple of ellipses here. We don't have the skills to manage the analytics and predictive modeling required to. That 45% at the bottom, what that tells us is that is a subset of retailers who've done a little more work. They're not just throwing their hands up in the air and saying, we don't have any resources. They're saying we don't have these specific resources because we know that the analytics required to make use of these technologies in a meaningful way, even if we could get these technologies rolled out to our stores or our distribution centers or our warehouses, it doesn't change the fact that we don't have the personnel to manage the intellectual aspect of leveraging these tools. So in a nutshell, it's a head on a keyboard moment. So let's jump ahead a slide and see what they think they can do about it. Because it's one thing to know the problem. It's another thing to ask these very same people who are kind enough to respond to our surveys. And again, retailers respond to our surveys because they know we are not going to share their personal information, and we know we are not going to, finger wag at them or tell them they need to get in contact immediately with a particular vendor because it's just not our business model. But these people who did respond to our survey, this is what they told us they need to do in order to get around these organizational inhibitors. And number one, top of the chart, no questions asked, is they need to understand that this is not an ROI initiative. Virtually every other technology or subset of a revolutionary thing that's coming down the road, whether it's AI or IoT or cloud technology, the key has always been prove to us the ROI. Show us that if we put money in now, this thing's going to pay for itself in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. This is not the case when you're talking about IoT. The retailers recognize this. This isn't about will these things pay for themselves immediately. This is a critical strategic initiative. And that is different. We don't see that a lot. We're starting to see it more directionally in some of the research that we're conducting currently. But this is the first time we really saw that. Again, this report came out in June. It's an important distinction because it shows that retailers are having an incredibly different mindset about what it is that their goal from a technology point of view is. It's not just to deliver results to the bottom line, it's to make sure that customers are getting the experience that they want, that products are where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there, that they're not turning business away because they're too penny wise and pound foolish to recognize the investments they need to be making. The data points that follow along here, 2, 3, and 4, increase the expertise to manage real-time monitoring throughout the operation. We talked about that in the previous slide. Retailers recognize there is going to be a talent gap here. They need, if they want to make sense of what these sensors are feeding back to them, they're going to need either really smart people or really smart analytic tools that can help make people smarter. And the following two are the same: analytics capabilities and business analytic capabilities. They want to make sure that if they do bite the bullet, invest in these technologies to feed enormous waves of data back at them, that they can make sense of that data and make actionable decisions as a result. So the insights and the data analytics will show them the way forward. If we jump ahead, I think we move into the next section. Oh, we've got one more. When we talk about those process barriers to digital transformation projects, it's important to notice the difference in perception by retailer performance. And this is essentially a pretty good look into, or pretty good viewpoint into why winners continue to win. One of the options that we put forth was representing IoT data in a meaningful way that enables insights. It essentially encapsulates everything I've been blathering on here about for the last 5 minutes, that the technology does you no good if you can't make actionable, if you can't make smarter decisions as a result of it. That is much more of an issue for the better performers. Retail winners at a tune of nearly 2 to 1, 54% to 33%, say that is a process barrier to their transformation projects right now. Were it not for that, they'd be further down the road than they are. And an equally important gap in the second data point down here, the lack of interoperability between different IoT-based technologies. Winners need more proof of concept. A moment ago, they told us, yes, we understand this is a strategic initiative. This isn't just an ROI-based initiative like so many of the other things that are being shoved in our faces right now. But what they need to know if they're going to take that leap of faith is that if I buy this technology from this particular vendor and I've already maybe, started conversation with this one, or I have a very small pilot programs begun with someone else, that these things are all going to work and talk intelligently to one another. And I'm not going to end up with a, what would be the good analogy, VHS and Betamax, thing where I have a collection of movies on one thing that I can't play on a machine over here. This needs to be proven to them, and particularly for the best performing retailers, it's a much bigger issue for them. If we jump down to that fourth data point down, we start to see where everybody else focuses their attention, unduly, we might add. The worse performing a retailer is, average and lagging retailers, they're, I don't want to say hiding behind the excuse, but they're much more likely to just put their hands up and say, we can't continue this conversation. We've got too much data coming in. We can't make sense of it already. We're not going to be able to deal with more of it coming at us in real time. And again, in our recommendations, we'll get to this. We are pretty bold and bullish on the fact that in today's economy, with consumers moving at the speed that they want and more than happy to change loyalty from one retailer to another or to Amazon more often than not, for what would have been a forgivable sin a few years ago and is no longer seen that way. This just isn't a valid excuse anymore. Um, Retailers are going to have the ability to accept data in real time. They're going to have to be able to sense and respond to issues as they occur. They cannot bury their head in the sand. And the better a performer is, the better their sales performance is right now, the more likely they are to tend to understand that. This is not fun. We empathize in every single way, but it is necessary. If we jump ahead one slide, I believe at this point, yeah, so now we get to shift our focus. So we've talked an awful lot about the theoretical of, or not even the theoretical, but we've painted the picture so far of what it is that retailers identify as the external challenges that are coming in from the outside world, the internal challenges that are preventing them from moving forward, and if they can get past those internal those internal organizational inhibitors, the opportunities that they see on the other side of that. So the real question then becomes, if we can turn that corner, if we can get past both external challenges causing change, internal challenges preventing change, and we can become the change agents that we want, what are the technologies that are going to be best suited to fit their specific needs? We'll see some differences here based on how retailers perform and also in the products that they sell, because different retail, there's no one size fits all here. But we were, I think, pleasantly surprised by how educated the industry is. Might not have been a lot of action so far, but the education level is pretty high. So if we jump ahead one slide, let's talk about technology and what's needed to get the job done. Retailers, by and large, to summarize this entire slide, get it. They know that there's a lot needed here to get the job done. The blue bars are the technologies that they consider necessary, and RFID systems bubble right to the top of that. If you'd asked us a few years ago when we were shouting about RFID into the wind, if this would be the case in the year 2023, I think we probably wouldn't have been as hopeful. We were very happy to see this. RFID, for those of you who are students of history, know this is not a new technology. It's a World War II technology that's been trying to find home in retail for the better part of 70 years at this point. The Walmart Sunrise Initiative of 2005 put a lot of people back on their heels to think this technology is not ready for prime time. It can't work in concrete bunkers, which stores tend to be. It can't work with liquids, which a lot of retailers tend to sell. It has a problem with reflective surfaces. It was a forced mandate that caused people to by and large, caused the industry to take a step back and say, that's not ready for prime time. This report is irrefutable evidence against that. Retailers recognize RFID works. They recognize that it's necessary. And everything else that falls below that is helpful to it, these are tools that go into making sense of the data that RFID would enable. Yes, we need, second point down, event-based alerting. RFID enables that. Intelligent data filtering is required to make sense of the RFID tools themselves. Everything is part and parcel to that first data point, which is RFID systems are capable, ready, and necessary. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And if we jump ahead one slide, winners are even more bullish on these things. This is the exact same data we just saw, but viewed through the lens of performance. So when we ask, what's necessary, this is who's driving what's necessary. The best performing retail winners, are absolutely more interested in or more cognizant of the fact that RFID systems are necessary, and that in order to make good decisions based on the data that RFID provides, they're going to need better data filtering. They're going to need better analytics. They're going to need more descriptive analytics. They're going to need more machine learning tools, particularly if they can't afford data scientists. They're going to need better, smarter tools that help mere mortals make really complicated decisions. They're going to need more bandwidth. They're going to need more analytics, and so on and so forth. This is 100% a maturity story, and it speaks volumes to the fact that winners don't win by accident. They tend to view a lot of these big, scary concepts as not so big and not so scary, but things to roll up their sleeves and think about. And they've been thinking about RFID for longer. They've been quietly observing the power that a lot of these IoT technologies enable if they're investments so far in a way that betrays the amount of the small amount of investment that's been made so far. The education level is high. The knowledge base is high. So let's move forward to talk about dollars and cents and what that really means. This is current status. So as you might notice, those top data points about the incredibly valuable and incredibly necessary nature of RFID, when you start talking about implementation, they fall a little bit further down the stack here. Only 46% of winners and only 37% of all others are currently using and happy with RFID systems. So again, knowledge is high, use is not quite up to par. But a lot of the things that we talked about that are prerequisite to make the most of those RFID systems when they are implemented have been underway. A lot of retailers are working to expand their network bandwidth. We're actually conducting a bespoke study right now to dig deeply into this, why they're doing it, what their root causes are, where they're investing, what they hope to get from it. We have our going in assumptions, but when we do our next call here with IORMA in probably a matter of a few weeks, we'll have some data to share around that. And a lot of it will have to do with the proliferation. We're certain, let me try that again. We predict a lot of it will have to do with the proliferation of mobile devices, both on the part of consumers and employees and store managers and. But it's good to see that that there has been more investment in some of these things than we might have thought even just a few short years ago. As Brian mentioned, the pandemic was certainly not the impetus for a lot of these things, but it was the accelerant. It brought up the bearing of why these projects are so important and why customers are so powerful and why retailers need to invest in order to keep them quasi happy, or at least not as pissed off as they certainly seem to be right now. This is directional evidence of the fact that retailers are invested in the things that they need to be, maybe not at the rate that we'd hoped, but certainly further along than they were 12 months ago, 24 months ago, and the like. It's interesting. It's very interesting. And as usual, the better performers have put their money where their mouths are, an awful lot more so than have the average and underperforming retailers. If we jump ahead one slide, we're not a company that thinks about 5 years from now. We've never been a company that sees a lot of value in theoretical best practices because, as Brian, who was a CIO for a lot of years, has so famously said, no one implements best practices. People implement solutions that are going to work for them. But we wanted to know from a retailer's point of view, because this is such a storied technology, because this is such a there's such a long tail behind IoT. I mean, before AI came along in 2016 and 2017 and started to dominate, the awards for most buzziest buzzword used in buzzworthy events, IoT was all anybody could talk about in 2015, 2016. And certainly, as we've already mentioned, students of RFID have been talking about the value of that technology at the very latest since the 90s. There have been a lot of people trying to find practical applications for it, as we said, a lot longer than that. But we wanted to know from the horse's mouth, what do you see as the real value of this long term? When you are a retailer sitting at the edge, contemplating what you're going to do with all this information as it gets fed to you by all these next-gen sensors distributed throughout the world, throughout your supply chain, throughout your supply network, throughout the consumer experience, what are you hoping to learn from it? And number one, retailers just want to be able to predict events before they occur and then automate their preventative actions. This answer would not have received as top of honors probably in 2019 as it does today. Pandemic scared the living bejesus out of all of us. And the fact that retailers do not want to get caught in that position again, their suppliers don't want to get caught in that position again, their shipping and logistics people don't want to get caught in this position again. They just want to be able to predict events before they occur and have a plan B for if this, then that. We actually, earlier this year, conducted our first ever study into KPIs. What are the key performance indicators that retailers are shifting towards to measure what success looks like? And a lot of them are rooted in if-then scenario planning. Retailers, no one likes to feel silly, and no one likes to get caught in a compromising position. This is proof positive of that. Everything else falls in line. Number two, we want real-time alerts to changing conditions. It's basically more of the same. Number three, that we want process improvements over time as the root causes of process issues are identified and resolved. Sure, we want to know what's happening, what can we do about it? Did what we do about it make a difference? Did it matter? Was it successful? These are very pragmatic approaches that result in no small part to the world having caught fire a few years ago. And so as we concluded this report, we talked about if you've been dragging your heels, maybe that's no longer a viable option for a whole host of reasons, from consumer dissatisfaction to Amazon's constant march towards making everything simple and easy and a no-brainer for people to just start and end their journeys there. To compete in that world, you need every advantage that you possibly can have on your side to at very least, be able to deliver on your brand promise of we're going to have the products we say we're going to have, when we say we're going to have them, where we say we're going to have them. And this entire ecosystem of technologies and processes that are tied up in digital transformation help facilitate that going forward. And as I've said numerous times now, and it's probably getting a little redundant, retailers get it. It's simply about implementation at this point. So if we jump ahead one more slide, we end up where we always end up. If you've read any of our research before, or if you plan to, we conclude every report with what we call report recommendations. We would be remiss to not at least offer retailers some direction based off of what we've seen in not only this current set of data of the report that we just spent, in this case, 33 slides talking about, but in the length of a full report, probably closer to 30 to 40 written pages talking about, but also to marry it with our own expertise. We've been doing this for the better part of 20 years now. As Brian said, we've done about 200 reports, maybe more than 200 reports. And prior to that, we were retail IT practitioners. So we have some blend of what we would consider hard-won wisdom with the constant influx of new data that enables us to make recommendations at the tail end of the report. So these are the recommendations that we make. If you're interested in reading the report, it's available on our website, rsrresearch.com. I know Brian already mentioned it's completely free. But when we look at the recommendations and we jump ahead one slide, the report itself goes into much greater detail for each one of these. But by and large, number one takeaway from this report, if your organization is not thinking about RFID right now, you need to be. It is time to let go of past perceptions. The past is not prologue. This is not 2005. These technologies work. We see an awful lot of demos from an awful lot of people. The technology is no longer the excuse. Everything else that surrounds the successful implementation of these tools, absolutely. The people required, the processes that have to be facilitated, the change management, the ability to analyze and make useful decisions based on the data that's being fed. Yes, those are all highly valid. And as this data has teased out, very much where retailers are. But if your organization is not thinking about IoT and specifically RFID technology's ability to make you smarter and give you greater visibility into what's happening, not just within the four walls of your company, but within the walls of all of your partners' companies and their operations, it's time to get over that. Number two, it's a continuation of number one. Put aside the why. This is not your typical retail technology implementation. We talked about the usual metrics of fast ROI doesn't apply. Up until this report, we had never seen this before. The number one and number two internal roadblocks are always some combination of we can't prove ROI to our executive team, or our technology is not going to work well with the new technology at hand, whatever technology we're discussing at that time. We've never seen people say, no, we get it. And we know there's going to be challenges here. And we recognize that ROI is not what we're after. We're just trying to bone up our infrastructure to a point where it's competent. We have never seen that before. And that's an important differentiation because, again, we've been doing this a long time. There is a palpable change within the retail industry to stop thinking about things as, why would we do this from a, dollars and cents point of view to why would we do this so it enables us to continue to play on point of view. And that's where we are. Number 3, join the modeling revolution. I spoke briefly a few moments ago about the importance that retailers ascribe to modeling. It's not new, but it is becoming increasingly more of a focus throughout the organization to play out, if we were to pull on this lever, what's going to happen over here? Or if we were to not do this and offer this instead, it's across the enterprise. It goes from promotions to pricing to catalog to product specific decisions to geographic specific decisions. Modeling is important. These tools help people recognize patterns. As human beings, part of what is, for quite some time now, separated us from some of the other species is our abilities to recognize patterns. These tools allow people to recognize patterns faster and smarter. So we invite everyone, if you're not thinking about the modeling revolution, you should be. Flexibility. The report that we did directly after this report was 100% about agility and resiliency, and we talk pretty passionately about one of the greatest outcomes from the pandemic itself was the exposure that retailers cannot be so staid in their ways. They have to be flexible. This is not the world it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and certainly not 20 years ago. Flexibility is what is going to separate good retailers from non-existent retailers. Everyone needs to know where their inventory is. They need to know if it's available, how it can be made available. That's sort of bread and butter at this point. How quickly a retailer can get that to people in very unique, interesting, creative, unheard of ways before, that's a lesson in the importance of flexibility. We talk at length about that in the report. And again, if you're interested in it, it is available for free to everyone. But flexibility is, again, it's not a checkbox. It's not something you can just say, boy, it'd be great if we were flexible. That is a top-down cultural phenomenon. If the highest levels of the organization understand how integral flexibility will be to future success and future survivability or future sustainability from a business sustainability point of view, then that's a really great start. It's the only way flexibility can really be achieved is if the people at the highest level understand that and recognize the value and the importance going forward. And lastly, one of the things that we said in this report, which we've actually never said before, is think small to think big. This is not an all or nothing sweeping endeavor. It is the culmination of a lot of small projects tied together under a common set of well-defined goals. A lot of times, this type of thinking has been problematic for our industry because people have been trying to tie together disparate solutions that do not work under one umbrella. The entirety of the purpose here is, if digital transformation is the goal, the technologies that are implemented and the changes that are taking place at a personnel point of view need to be thought out in advance so that you can understand how these things are going to work together, so you don't end up, or the retailers don't end up, with one solution that doesn't work well with another. We saw it as a primary concern, particularly for winners, when we were asking them, what is it you're not feeling so great about? What are you seeing as a roadblock to potential progress here? And they were clear. We don't know if all these things are going to be interoperable. We don't know if all these technologies are going to work and play well with one another. So one of the things that we tell our clients on the technology side is, if that is indeed something that you can do, it needs to be part of your brand promise. It needs to be a big part of the sales pitch, because retailers are reticent to move on even just the smallest thing if they think 6 months from now that's an outdated project that doesn't play well with something that we already have 6 months down the road. So it's two sides of the same coin. Technologists need to focus on making these things interoperable with one another and not playing the me, my, mine game. And, if you got to go all in with me and, forego every other technologist out there. And we're seeing a lot less of that in the market. We're seeing broad, sweeping partnerships between companies that we never really thought we'd see before. But on the retail side of the house, it's a move away from that type of thinking that they have become accustomed to because of the way the technology community had been for so long, with making widget A not being able to play with vendor B's widget C. We highly encourage retailers, if you are not playing in the sandbox with digital transformation tools, you need to be. We go into it again at length in the report, and it's something that we clearly feel quite strongly about. We are always available to answer any questions that you might have. Hopefully this report has at least sparked your interest to either want to engage more with the content itself in its full format, or to reach us. You can always reach us for the partners here, our contact information. We don't do a lot on Twitter. We're much more active on LinkedIn. We don't do anything on Facebook anymore. But probably for most business folks, the way to reach us would either be LinkedIn, and both Brian and I are there, as well as our other partner, Paula. And then our Director of Business Development, Linda Wolf, is available here via email, as are both Brian and I. So with that, Brian, I hand it back to you if you want to bring us home and just.
Well, thanks, Steve. It's a great topic. Digital transformation, as I said in the very beginning, is something that other industries have taken to heart. We can think of the industries that have done a really great job of it, when very clearly their product is digital in nature. For example, the financial services industry. Retailers are basically selling things that are made out of atoms. They're not made out of bits, but they have learned that to be able to analyze those things and watch them in real time across a far-fetched enterprise, they need to have digital twins of those physical things so that they can observe them, they can optimize the processes that handle them, and they can more effectively bring products to market that consumers want to buy. So this is an exciting thing. It's one of those things that Steve talked about briefly that has been around a long time in people's minds, but it has now reached a level of maturity where most retailers can take advantage of them if they have the heart. Our point in this report, to reiterate one more time, is that this isn't really about getting ahead anymore. It's really about surviving. That retail winners are deep in the weeds when it comes to these technologies. Average and underperformers are still holding back. They will find themselves strategically disadvantaged very soon if they do not grab onto it. So we encourage everybody to do that. We encourage you to read the research, as Steve has said, and I said earlier, it's always free to you. All you have to do is go to our website and you can take a look at the research yourself. And finally, we always love your feedback. So if you have something to say to us, go ahead and reach out to us, and we will take your feedback to heart and try to improve our product every single time. So thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing you all very soon.